Right. Paul, Greg, Brian, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. How are you all doing?
Oh, that's so
Good to
nice.
be on. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Love hopping on here. Now we got Paul with us this time.
Paul,
So
we've been talking about Paul for so long. And then everybody, if you take a quick look at Adam, you see that's where all the magic happens behind him. You notice that he's got the love couch and he's got all the flags.
He almost did a spit take. You almost got him to do a spit take. That's perfect.
Welcome. And Adam talks all low. Hey, welcome to the bedroom here. And
yeah, he's really putting us in the mood.
He really is. So, and you said it's dark out. Is that true?
Yeah, it's dark out. There's only a few lights.
That's it, man. That's it.
But it's
so why'd you call this meeting, Adam?
Yeah, I just I thought it'd be really good to have us all kind of collaborate. I know we did a previous podcast with Kevin the High List, and I thought Paul's a good friend of mine. I've done a few podcasts with Paul.
Yeah, we were on.
Paul,
yeah,
you was on his podcast as well. And I thought, why not?
I'm a huge fan, Paul, of the Write Your Own Story. Am I saying that right?
Rewrite your own story. Yeah.
I'm such a fan because I don't have social media, but I go through LinkedIn, and every time I hit on that, I go, oh my God, that's brilliant. So really good stuff. I hope you're getting great play with that, Paul.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to do, I hope you guys are too. Are you guys doing more in-person stuff now again?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This
so I got an event coming up.
Yeah.
So it's been great. It's
Where's that event?
Good feedback. What's that?
Where's that event? Maybe it's crossing
Southern California, Long Beach, at the Long Beach Playhouse.
Yeah, last time I was in Long Beach, you know where the Queen Mary is? There in Long Beach. So I actually had to do a gig there. It was a stand-up gig for a couple hours. It was wonderful. I had a great time, and then they let me sleep over and have a meal. So it was a cheap date. It was really wonderful. You don't want to go around Long Beach after dark, I found out. Long Beach is a different daytime and nighttime. Long Beach back then was a little different.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. Queen Mary's in the downtown area, so absolutely, yeah.
Right.
If you go a couple blocks in, I need protection from Greg and Brian at that point.
Yeah.
You mean Adam? Adam, use protection. We love you. We love you. Temper your enthusiasm. You just met her, for the love of God.
I kind of want to hear more. I would say we start off going to Paul because Paul, your stuff with what you're doing is interesting to me. Because of one, just not what you do, the terms you use about rewriting things. And I think it's great. And I don't know much about it other than what I've seen on social media, but the idea of, I'm assuming part of this involves a writing exercise of some sort, a literal one. Right. And I think as Greg and I always do, got a page of notes on every call that I'm on, always have a notepad writing stuff down. And like I said, I showed you guys the stuff I got to get done. I just have my little sticky list thing of these are the today things I need to hit. And, we've never talked about it. We talk about it in our courses in terms of, this is how we do a framework, but we kind of gloss over the fact of how powerful it is just to write something down on a piece of paper. Literally to write it down makes it so much more powerful than just thinking about it or saying it. So I'm guessing you're sort of in that ballpark. So I kind of want to hear about that because that's something that we do, explicitly all constantly, but we don't ever really talk about it. And because it's so, seems so self-evident to us because we've done it our whole lives that, maybe other people don't realize it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Actually, it's more of a metaphor than anything else. Basically, I have the saying is, take back your life pen and write the story that you want for yourself, not for anybody else. Because all through my life, people have tried to take the pen from me. And all through my life, I said, no,
great.
I want the pen back. I'm going to write the story how I want it written. And that's how it's going down. So that's what we want to do for our clients, right? Is so often we're at jobs and situations where we're on autopilot. Yeah, I know you guys talk about autopilot in a different way, but I'm talking about autopilot in life. You go to work, you go home, you have your kids, and I understand that everybody has responsibilities, everybody has to pay their bills, and I get a lot of that. But we only have one life to live, so we might as well go after the things we want to go after. Because when it's done, when you get in your 70s and 80s and you look back at your life and you're like, man, I lived for Friday. I bodozed Monday through Thursday because I hated what I did, and I only lived for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think I think that's sad. I want people to wake up on Monday and going, man, I can't wait to start my work week. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's going to be great. That's what you guys are doing with your work week. I'm sure you got, I mean, I know things are a grind and not everything is going to be pleasant, but overall you gotta enjoy what you're doing. And I know that you two and you three actually enjoy what you're doing. I can hear it in your podcast. I can hear it in your presentations. And that's what it's all about. It's all about trying to find your passion, try to find your goals. But here's some writing that
Paul, what I love about that, I absolutely love where you're going, because Brian, if you take a look at it from and Adam, you're just recovering, I know, have some vitamin E and just stand by. We'll be to you in a minute. If you start thinking, he's got a new girlfriend, folks. If you start thinking about the entitlement issue, right? People think that they're entitled to something, and we work very hard to get where we are. And the whole reason that we do human behavior pattern recognition and analysis is that humans set a pattern. Why? Because it's a path of least resistance. It's the least caloric intervention in their life. And so they keep doing it and doing it and doing it. It becomes a habit. Then they can't get out of it. And they come to you guys and say, hey, how do we get out of this nasty habit? And we're trying to say, okay, no offense, but if you cut out the middleman, you can rewrite your story at any point. First of all, there's people that do it for nefarious reasons. They rewrite their story and then find a girlfriend or a boyfriend and string them along just to take money, right? People do that all the time. And then you see these crappy shows, Dr. Pimple Popper, 90-Day Romance, all that other stuff that you can throw in the dumpster, and it's just a hot mess. But what do those people do? They're trying to portray something that you watch and you eat the popcorn on somebody else's life. Life is so much fun that if you're not out there living it in first person and you're just an actor in somebody else's life, how miserable would that existence be? I mean, so that's what inspires me about your work, Paul, and Adam as well, because Adam, you're so young and you don't know it yet, but you've got such a great handle on how things work. And then when you're just BS and like I listen to my only critique, Adam, is that stop using other people's quotes, because yours are great. You don't need that. You think that you have to rely on somebody else and put a Nelson Mandela quote up there. Listen, man, you're sage beyond your years. The funny part of that is it takes most people. I'm 60 and I still haven't found it. I'm still swinging the boat or in the dark room trying to hit it. When you get it, you and Paul both just lay it out there on the table, and people are going to learn from what made you popular or famous or happy, because that's what life is. Life is finding those things, those inspirations to wake up the next morning and go, I'm going to face this next day, rather than shoot myself, hang myself, or turn to drugs or illicit sex. Why is that on my mind? Look where Adam is.
Yeah,
in the illicit sex den of London.
I was at the ending of that.
Where's your mom during all this? I need to know.
Far away. No, I really appreciate the conference, Gray, and I really think, like you said, it's your experiences in your years, isn't it, and what happens in your life. And someone might be 50 or 60, but if someone's had certain experiences in their life early on, you can't really put a number on that, can you? And I think, like you said, with people doing jobs and living their life and not being satisfied or happy, it's quite sad, really. And like, people, I think, have a choice. And you talk about habits and behavior and being accountable for your actions. A lot of it comes down to that. And I've noticed, in the work that I do with people, they ultimately have a choice. And I'm sure Paul's seen this in his work, and you guys see it in your work. You meet a spectrum of people who are going through different things. And some people are going through a lot of stuff, but they're achieving certain things and getting jobs or doing a degree. And then some people might be going through something as well, but they're not. Right. And there's a what I've noticed is that it comes down to choice. But I think it's really interesting with what Paul does, and people being able to rewrite their story. And even if people go through bad things in their life, you can kind of flip that around, I think, and use that as fuel and motivation to change, do something.
I think that's Paul's exact point. My thing is that I get frustrated quickly, because the only social media that I ever check in on is that damn LinkedIn, and it's driving me mad. And then I hear two types of things. One, that people are spending all their time using somebody else's quote, and you know what? Live your life. You rewrite your life. Be that person you want to be. And I want to hear what's on your heart. Then the other thing is somebody going, oh, you don't know my story. My story, I had this, I had that, I had, you know what? We've all endured death and we've all endured abuse and we all have scar tissue and we're all broken little snowflakes. And if you constantly come from that cave and try to say, now listen, before I talk, I want to give you a preamble and my theme song and all these things that are wrong with me. What are you talking about? Get out there and meet people and share your story with them and be interested. Sometimes tune, down your transmit and open up the receive and tell me what your story is. Life is a wonderful, multifaceted journey, and do you want to be the one at the end? My dad on his deathbed reached over and grabbed me. My dad, a former Marine, just the strongest, most biggest bully I ever met in my life. And he said, never say coulda, woulda, shoulda. And in a minute later, he was dead. And I was like, oh, no, you can't do that to me. You know what I mean? You throw out that challenge and then you bail. But I know that he's still up there kicking the shit out of an angel and looking down on me and glad that that's what we do every day. Every day we challenge our assumptions. And that's got to be what you're doing.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, do you want to?
No, go for it.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's being grateful for where you live, isn't it? But grateful for what you have, and like you said, having like what you said, your dad said, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I think it's their big words, aren't they? Really, because life is finite, and I think sometimes people kind of, like you said, autopilot earlier, kind of fly along on autopilot, not really thinking about what they're doing. And you talk about it, and how people are on autopilot, their minds elsewhere, they might be listening to headphones, like people kind of glide through sometimes, and you don't want to have those regrets of thinking, oh, I wish I should have done this. Or
no, I totally agree. And you've got people on this call right now that, like, if I was going to send something to a girl or a boy that I fancied, it wouldn't be a mixtape of somebody else's music. You get what I'm trying to say? It would be Greg's mixtape. Now, it would be some horrific shit if you weren't like in my mindset. But to me, it would be magic. And I think everybody has got that story right below the surface. And if you sit back and let them share it with you, I think they will. Brian's a musician. Would you know that? Brian's a musician.
That's a good point, and it kind of ties back into what you said about the using someone else's quote. Something that's just normal. That's what everyone does. But I was thinking in like when you give someone a gift, that kind of just what it made me think of. It's like I always love it where I've gotten a gift from someone where it meant something to them, and they thought I would benefit from it. Like I had a friend and his wife, like she met me and Michaela. Like I didn't spend a lot of time with her, know me that well, but me and her husband were buddies because we were working together, and he was a Marine and I was a Marine. So we we're like, obviously you get close quickly, right? Even though we were just working together. And then when my wife and I got married, like she did this whole thing where Frank like gave us something that we could hang up, and it was like her quote passage thing that it was a saying from somewhere, but it was she goes, this is why this is important to me. And it was just about relationships and stuff, but it was like so much cooler than the knife set that you got, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, hey, like she's so happy to give us a gift, and it was meaningful to her, and loves us, and sees all of these things in us, and goes, this is who I think you are, this is what I always look to, and this is what I think, and it was just like a really, really cool, very personal. It took this and made it so personal that it was like, damn, like I have to put this up in my house. This is so nice and thoughtful. So because it was a little bit of her. So now she's now here in our house giving us sort of advice or a way to remember
every day
a perspective, like a perspective on like, things are going to be tough sometimes, and so it's so cool because it's not just something that we hung up. It was a personalized gift that was meant to her and now means something to us. And it's a reminder. So I just, when you talked about that, Greg, it kind of had that memory emotion linked to that, but it's, right. She was being deliberate. She was being deliberate and thoughtful, and that was it. And it didn't cost her a lot of money. It didn't cost her a lot of time. It was just something that it meant something. And I'm like, that's so much cooler. Like, I don't know. I just, so it kind of tied in all those things you talk about. And that's how we try to be. And what you're talking about, Em, is with other people is like, just be deliberate, be genuine and thoughtful. And you know what, like that's all you can ask for. And I've had stuff where I've been that way and we came across as I was being short or whatever. And then later on people reached out and said, hey, you know what? I really appreciate the fact that you were very upfront and said this and meant this. I could tell you meant it. It made me upset, but I realized I was the one sort of in the wrong on that, and you were being honest and open, and they realized even months later, like, hey, what that guy said was actually that was really good, you know what I mean? And so it comes across that way, but I tie it
because you have no social filters, Brian.
None whatsoever.
People have to he only mimics that of a human child. Exactly.
I do, but it's that personal touch to it, and I think that kind of ties in. It just had that memory motion link for me. So sorry, tied into what you guys are talking about though, with that message and what it is, and it means so much more when it's personal and it's to you versus it's a quote we post on social media.
Right.
And the thing that I was thinking about,
please, Paul.
Okay. No. When I was thinking about when you guys were talking is listening, right? They were listening, Brian, somebody was listening to you.
Yeah.
And as a result of them listening to you, they come up with this personalized gift because they listened to what you were talking about.
Yep.
And I think that's huge. There's so often in life, we just want somebody to listen to us. We don't need advice or anything like that. We just need a voice and an active listener, because when we have a lot of conversations, sometimes the other person on the other end is just polite enough to be quiet while the other person is talking, and they're not really actively listening to what they're having to say. And we're, as human beings, you guys know better than I do. We understand what's going on, right? And we feel kind of bad, like we're talking right now, and this person's not really listening to what we're saying. And when we're in a conversation where both people are actively listening to each other, that's where the magic is. When we're both present. Sometimes when we're in conversations, we're thinking about the past, or we're thinking about what we have to do in the future, and we're not in the conversation. We're not in the present. I think it's important that we try our best at all costs to be present when we're doing something.
Right. Now, and you know what? Showing up is 90% of it, right? Being there in the moment. And Paul, you said something about active listening. I think that's cool. Most people sit back and some people could take the yellow pad example wrong. The yellow pad is there so I can jot down a trigger that you said earlier, so I can focus on what you're saying now and go back to that thing in your statement. Some people mistake that listen, while you're talking, I'm preparing to fill the silence after you shut up with what I want to say. Well, that's not conversation. That's what we call non-versation. You just filling in the gaps when you think there's a pregnant pause and I got to step forward. And Paul, what you said is so important. What you got to do sometimes, like I always ask open-ended questions and then give a pregnant pause when I'm on a public transportation. Brian hates it because we're together all the time. We're trying to talk about something and I see somebody in need, and the emoter side of me makes me step out of line, and I go over and I go, hey, what's on your mind? And the person starts just talking, and people come up to me and go, how do you do that? Because everybody wants to transmit. Everybody wants to tell their story. Who doesn't? Nobody wants to watch a film and go, you see that guy in the back that's flipping them burgers? That's me. Everybody wants to be that protagonist or the antagonist. That's why you think these Marvel movies about the superstars are so popular, because we want to be that person. We want to be the person that changes something for the better in our story. My challenge is like Adam Parr, you can be that person. Adam, you were handed just a shit sandwich as a kid, and look at where you are now, sleeping with some young girl that doesn't know how popular you're going to be one day. You get what I'm trying to say? Your mom's got to know. But the idea is that when you think about it, it's the same thing. Brian's the most humble person that I know. Me, not. I'm just out there all the time, completely transparent. But that helps me open up other people to be transparent. That's my way of getting you to open up. You know, that's not for everybody. A lot of people get punches in the nose when they try that. But I just love to learn about the human condition and what's on your heart, what's on your mind, what's your story, you know?
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
It's all right. It's okay. I think it's a really good point. And I think, like you said, what you said about like people listening, that it's really key. And I think like that's all some people want sometimes. And that's what I found in my work is, 85% of that might be me just listening to them because they haven't got anyone else to share what's going on in their life to. So, it's kind of like a fizzed up bottle of pop, like Coke, and it's that pressure that's bouncing around in there. And you just listening to them releases that steam and the gas from what's bouncing around in there. And I think it's so important to listen. I think like a lot of people don't listen. They might be thinking about, you know, like Paul said, what happened in the past or the future or tomorrow. And I know like in the previous work you and Brian, you and Greg and Brian did in like the military, like you have to listen. That could probably be the difference between probably someone dying or living. If someone doesn't listen to the accurate, right information and do something that they've got to do in certain circumstances, maybe, like listening is key. And I think like you said with the Marvel films, people want to share their story. People, you know, deep down have that inside of them. You know, they want to express what happened. You know, everyone has a story, I think. And I think it's a heavy burden to carry if people aren't sharing a story in some way.
Well, you know what else is hard? I'm a fan of Adam. I'm a fan of Paul. I'm a fan of Brian. There's a lot of people out there. Abigail, you both know her, like to listen to her stuff and pay attention to her. Andy, John, you know, you guys know the podcast I'm talking about. Here's the thing. They've got a message that they're delivering. So that's cool because everybody that has a message is on transmit. But every once in a while in our worlds, we have to listen. And I'll tell you one thing that I've noticed that's wrong with the way we do police work nowadays in the States. What happens is it's declarative knowledge, it's descriptive analytics, and it's in your face right now. You shut off the car. You have to calm down. You do. Well, listen, when we're already coming into an agitated situation, the wonderful analogy that you just gave about the Coca-Cola bottle, which just shows again that you're, you know, beyond your 10. But the idea is we're already amped up. And what cops have been trained for the last 5 decades is to take control. And if people are yelling, yell a little louder. And if people are using force, use one level above. Do you see how that can amplify into an untenable situation? If we tried that, I would caution everybody, try this at home tonight with your family. When you sit around, ask for the potatoes. Then ask for the potatoes. Now you're going to give me the potatoes. Then you're going to sit over there. But if we started talking like that all the time, we would have a crappy time at home. So I'm saying, and it's not bashing on cops because there's crappy 7-Eleven clerks and, you know, crappy people bagging your groceries and stuff. I'm saying that to truly open up to another human being, you got to kind of let the force field down a little bit, let your defenses down a little bit, and be transparent. Now, I'm not saying be stupid and open up your pockets and hand them your wallet. What I'm saying is ease off the conversation a little bit, have less expectations at the beginning, and let's see where it goes. What did we do on this call? This is a free form call, I would call it, where we all just wanted to call in and talk for a few minutes. But we're getting a lot done, aren't we? I think that's better sometimes than having a rigid set of expectations when you go into, you know, the interview and just pissing everybody in the room off.
You know, I want to piggyback on that, Greg, what you're talking about with police officers and such, because I'm 41. And when I was growing up, you know, I would say probably 5 out of 10 boys would say, what do you want to grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I don't know if I see that today. And
Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with like all the negativity that's going on in the media about police officers. They always talk about what they do wrong. This. So like as somebody growing up, a teenager, and saying to yourself, well, I don't want to be a police officer. There's nothing positive about it. I'm always blamed for this. I'm always this. I'm always that. So what can we do as a society to change that narrative? Because we do need good police officers and we need to fulfill that. So how can we change that?
So real quick, Greg,
go ahead,
let me
Brian.
just real quick, because part of that fits into what we are as humans. We have a very, very strong negativity bias, and that's thankfully kept us alive for a very long time. And so it's very, very easy to focus on the negativity, whether that's because
of the chemicals that are released in your brain. Yes.
In our own life, in each other's, right? We constantly focus. So that is a major, major part of that reason specifically, but everyone listening, think about that for everything. Think about that for your order you got wrong at a restaurant. Think about that as an interaction. Think about you looking at your own life or you picking on someone else's life to analyze, like, what do? We go, look at how effed up they are, or look what they did wrong here. We have that bias in us. So if I'm not doing something to counter that, I'm always going to come out that way. I just want to throw that in there, Greg.
No, it's perfect. So let me jump on this.
He was saying.
listen, Fortune, Paul's 41. Brian, you're 20 something. I'm in my 60s, and
I'm
you got
19,
Adam.
Greg. I'm
Adam
19
that just
years
reached
old.
puberty. You get what I'm trying to say, and he wants to get back to humping like a rabbit. Well, we're getting there, Adam. We'll get there. So his girlfriend's in the closet. I can hear her knocking. So the idea is this: look, rarely do you have a job where you carry around a gun and are authorized to use it, even to the point of deadly force. Few jobs have that. Okay. Second thing is, few jobs have a talisman, a badge, a copper, a thing that you show people that means something. This means that right now you are no longer free to leave. That's a tremendous amount of responsibility. So I'd ask you to measure that, Paul, on this side, and then everybody on the call has got to remember. You remember, like 6 months, 8 months ago, that apartment collapsed in Florida and killed those poor people, you know, and then now they're looking at, oh my gosh, this didn't go and they didn't do that. Listen, if you construct a shitty house and your foundation and the fundamentals that you put into your architecture are shoddy, sooner or later, that's going to collapse and it's going to hurt a lot of people. So what's happened is we wanted this level of police work for so long. And we kind of got on what you guys are talking about, that impulse power. You know, hey, listen, I've got the authority. I've got the badge and gun. I'm the one that has to step in. But guess what? What were we specializing in? It took us battered women getting killed before cops intervened and the law was changed to say, hey, domestic violence is this kind of crime and somebody's got to go to jail and you got to do it. And now we're at the point, because we grow, we learn, you know, we're unique little snowflakes that have to break and fracture before we learn. Just like Brian said, now we have learned that, wait a minute, not every situation requires a hammer or a club. Sometimes we have to put away those tools and talk. You know what? Maybe I'm not the resident expert on this. I need to bring in an advisor that has mental health background. Do you know what? To cops that's slapping them and taking away their authority. So what we have to do, look, being a cop is a noble profession. It's like being a knight of the round table, but you got to earn it every day. And there's those folks that didn't walk into it with that mindset. And that's why we are far afield. Now, will I yell at politicians? Yes. Because just like sports stars, you're setting an example. And when you bash the cops, so will your neighborhood. Now, should I be against news media? Yeah, because the news media portraying one side of the story and saying unknown who shot first in this caper where a person was killing people and a cop had to intervene with deadly force. If you're of the mindset that an officer of the law wants to escalate the situation and use deadly force or get into a pursuit, you're out of your mind. As a matter of fact, at on-duty and off-duty roll call, you're hugging each other saying, thank God we didn't have to do that tonight. So I think a lot of things happen. I think Hollywood's got to back off on the negative portrayal. So does the news. So does, congressmen trying to get their little shtick on LinkedIn or whatever it is. But I also think that we have to demand more of our police professionals. And we have to say, just like an engineer that's building that Florida condo, you got to do your best work when you're out there for me. And if not, you can be replaced. That's the other thing. You chose the job. So every time I hear a cop get on and bellyache to me, hey, I did 27 years of a cop and I faced everything that you did. And you know what? I loved my experiences. That's how I grew. I mean, size-wise, weight-wise, and why I'm doing the job that I'm doing now. So I hope that answered in some small way, Paul. I like to hold coppers accountable.
Yes. I was just wondering, because we want the best of the best. And like you said, like when I was growing up, that was a noble profession. That was like, man, most boys and girls wanted to be law enforcement.
Yep.
And we don't feel that way now. And I feel like we need the best of the best to get into the field. And I don't want to scare off the best of the best going somewhere else when I feel like their best could be in law enforcement.
That's it, Paul. That's exactly it. Yep. Because think about it. If you take a look at it, low pay, you're constantly getting assailed. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's second guessing every move that you make, and people are trying to create laws in Congress that we already have on the books, folks. Take a few minutes and take a look at the U.S. Constitution. Good document. But I totally agree with you. But I think that we've failed because of how we set artists and professional sports players and Hollywood actors. We've set them to a higher standard. Like for example, Ukraine is a big issue right now, and so we want to go and see what Brad Pitt has to say about Ukraine. What are we doing? You get what I'm trying to say? How about we go to facts and science and take a look at it? I'm kind of that way. So I'm all for what you're saying, Paul. I just think that in addition, You have to understand that we're going to be watching you very closely when you're out there on a job. And that doesn't happen with every job.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
Because I know in the UK, like the police here, like in the laws are different and there's a different setup. But like recently, I won't go off topic too much, but with the, I don't know if you saw the police, the Met police chief or someone who in charge wanted to basically investigate our prime minister over the parties during the lockdown.
Right.
And then all of a sudden she disappears. The mayor, she was removed from the position. And then in the media, it said there's so much corruption in the Met Police, and this isn't right, and this isn't right. And like you said, I think it's like the media has a big part to play because it might make people change their minds. I mean, when I was at college, I wanted to be a police officer, and that was my kind of goal that I wanted to do. And I had a lot of people who were police officers that I spoke to who were ex-military.
I bet. Yeah.
And at the time we had cutbacks, and I think there was maybe a recession at the time. And a lot of the police officers said, "Don't be a police officer, join the military." And then when I was joining the military, they were saying, "Oh, I wouldn't want my son joining the army." So I felt a bit kind of roadblocked and confused by both ends. But
right.
I think like what you say a lot of the time, what you and Brian talk about is like, you know, training and how training changes people's behavior. And there isn't sometimes, like you say, you talk about gear and things like that and how people go into those roles. But I think do you think it's the training that plays a big part, and probably depending on, I'm not too clued up to like American, the police in different states, but do you think it might be the state as well?
Yeah. And let me throw this at you because I know Brian's itching to get in there because he's got a great feel on this. So the Fulton County, Georgia Attorney General for Fulton County. So Georgia's a state within, the 50 states, and Atlanta is a district, and Fulton County is outside of Atlanta. So she fought hard to get in. I liked everything that I read about it. Fannie Wills, I believe is her name, if I'm getting that right. And it's been months since I looked it up, so I might be wrong on the last name, but I think it's close. I actually sent messages of motivation to her. You stick with it because she's got a great background, great speaker, great post, everything else. Now, she got in and she spent her entire time since she's been voted in going after Trump, who's our former president, to prove that he committed a crime on January 6th and with voter fraud. Okay, so you finally worked your ass off to get into the position where you can do the best for people, and you decided to take the Wayback Machine and go back here and settle a political score. Now that's got Chicago written all over it. I know it's Fulton County, Brian, but we see that a lot in the United States. And I would call that a form of corruption. Do you see what I'm saying? Corruption doesn't just mean you're on the pad. Corruption can mean you're saying stuff that you know is principally wrong, or fomenting hatred when you should be for peace or happiness. You get where I'm going?
Yeah, I see there. I mean, I look at some of these issues, or the way, I know it's very easy and everyone likes to bash the media because of course it's just a big thing you can point to and say the media. It's like, okay, well, like who, like what did you read that you didn't like, or what was that story? How was it covered? What do you mean? And I think those are more symptoms, really. The media stuff hasn't changed as much as we think it has. I think it's gotten louder, and I think it's changed because of social media and how people share information. But you're looking at the same problems that people dealt with thousands of years ago on the way they got information. And because we have so much more awareness and so much more freedom and so much more information is shared instantaneously globally, that's too much to comprehend. It's very difficult. So because of that, because there's dissonance now in the way I see things and the way it's getting reported to me, either on the news or through social media, I'm going to get upset. Well, I'm not going to get upset at the fact that I don't know anything about Russia and Ukraine because I just watched some videos on it. So now I'm an expert. Let me tell you why. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, well, it's the media's fault, and which really means it's our fault because this is what we tune into. And Greg kind of brought that up, is like we look at people. We look at, oh, I really like what you say here, hey, you know what? What do you think about that thing over there? I mean, there was a news interview here in the United States, and they had one guy, Marine Medal of Honor winner, Dakota Meyer, who did some heroic stuff in Afghanistan. He's an absolute hero. He's a fellow Marine. I don't know him personally, but I'd take a bullet for him. Okay, so he's sitting next to a guy who was on the Russia desk at CIA for 30 freaking years. And they go to, I mean, imagine that you've devoted 30 years of your life to studying this country, and then they're going to bring some kid who did something heroic in Afghanistan to get his take on it too. Like, you know what? Go F yourself. Like, you don't get to do that. Like, stay in your lane. Like,
Right.
why would we put value in that person's opinion? It's the same stuff with, just look at how celebrities handle it. Some of them do a really great job. Some of them stay where they're at and try to go, like Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart's done more for the 9/11 first responders than any celebrity out there. He championed that cause as a native New Yorker, and he took the ball over the last 20 years and he's run with it. He's testified. He knows all these people personally get sick. That's how he chose his thing right here. You know what I'm saying? So he said, well, this is what I'm going to do for you. And that's great. That's amazing. Whether you like his politics or anything or not, he did something good for those who serve. Like, so he gets a pat on the back from me. But you just want to come on and have a comment and bash something. It's like, why do we pay so much attention to those people? Why do we hop on? Why do we comment? And that's what is a perfect example. When I look at stuff, when I'm taking in information or I'm pushing something out there, whether through a comment or a post, it's literally, I have a very simple rule. Does this add value to the conversation? Is my comment on this person's post going to add value? All right. Or add support to them is fine too. But does it add to the, because if all you're doing is just complaining and whining, then you know what? You're not adding any value. And if all you're posting is junk or someone else stuff, like, how are you adding value to any of this conversation? And so that's how I look at it. So I don't get as upset at these different groups just because I'm like, it's all the same to me. I mean, it's why are we asking your opinion on something that, what, just because you're popular? I mean, and that's the problem. And I think that's my biggest issue. That's hard to control, but that's how we get it. I mean, you can go back to ancient Rome, and one of the best ways people would like to get information was, well, one, they'd have to post things on a reading wall, right? And then certain people would take their stylus, that's what it's named after, go down there, write that out and deliver the news. But you know what a lot of people enjoyed? I don't need the news from the wall. I'm rich. I've got my party and my friends are going to come over. I don't need to go down there and read it. Greg, what's your take on the situation?
There you go.
So I would get Greg, my buddy, to give me his take on the situation. And then I would go tell everyone that. Well, that's exactly what it is today. That's editorializing on Greg's part, but that's what we're seeing. I think the distinction is the editorializing line has creeped so far that we can't tell what someone reporting or they reporting what they want us to think, because those are two different things. And I think even people do that now unknowingly. Like there's people that apologize or retract stories, and you're like, they don't even realize how far down that path they've gone to editorializing on the subject versus saying, this is what I saw. This is what I felt when I was there. These are the photos I have from it. This is what I think is going on. Now it's starting off where the first line of the story is a bash on whatever it is. And you're like, and I think sometimes we don't know that. And then so that seeps into everything that we do now. So we're the same way with stuff when we're posting stuff. I just think the problem is a bit more historical than people realize. I just think it's a lot louder now, and there's no barriers to entry to the conversation. So you could have a viral tweet and all of a sudden we all like your opinion now for at least a few weeks until we move on to a new shiny object. So I think, but that's not that person's fault. They shouted out into the void on Twitter, and then all of a sudden everyone else is the one who elevated the situation, not that individual. So I think we're figuring all that out right now. I really think we're in the middle.
I would ask you to add this though, Brian. I would ask you to add historical perspective when it comes to age. So I remember the first time I was in Afghanistan, then the second time. First time I was in Afghanistan, it was clearly that we owned communication. The ring road, all of the lines of comm, everything was on our side. Then the second time going over there, seeing my Taliban counterpart holding a flip phone. You get what I'm trying to say? On the Roshan, calling people. And it was like, okay, this technology was born fully grown in Afghanistan. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I grew up in an environment where when I came home from school, after the sports day was done, I sat at the kitchen table, and while we ate, my old man was wolfing down the food and chugging a couple of drinks, right? And my mom would come in and say, "Oh, it looks like there's problems in Vietnam again today." And my dad would say, "You don't know a fucking thing about Vietnam." And he would start educating, and we would talk about that. Whatever happened at that kitchen table, Brian, was my piece of the world. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And so what happens now is there's so many pieces of the world and so much conjecture and so much opinion-based testimony that I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by events and we let that run our life. And I think most people, I don't want to use most, I think some people are like me, and they're afraid because they don't know enough about an issue, and they read too much news, and they just don't want to come out of bed in the morning. You get what I'm trying to say? I mean, that opinion that you're giving me is so bleak and the outlook is so bad that it causes a rift. And so I didn't have that when I was growing up, because I had less information to process and more like-minded people, because my dad yelled pretty loud. You know what I'm saying? But I think part of the problem is social media. And by the time you found perhaps your voice, you've had to wade through a lot of crap. I don't know. Am I on the right track, Paul?
Well, the theme that I feel that both of you guys are talking about is there's a lot of misinformation. And I feel like you go on the internet and you're looking at things, trying to educate yourself. And for me, in the back of my head, is this site reputable? Am I getting the right information? So back to your point, Greg, you kind of get nervous talking about things because you're thinking, well, I did read this, but I don't know how reputable the site is.
Right.
But going to your point, Brian, talking about different generations, at one point in time, we had to go to the library to get information, right? But how you could go to there and say, well, is that book reputable?
Right.
Yeah, it might have a main title on it, but is it really reputable? People might say, because they're generational, oh yeah, it's a library, they're going to come up with it. But probably during that time, it would be like just saying to you, well, how'd you get that information? I went to the library. It's like saying today, where'd you get that information? Well, I got it off the internet. And people would chuckle like, oh, you got it off the internet, so it must be true.
Right. No, and but that's how I feel like that's how it's always been. There's there's policies, there's legal policies in our country that are based on urban legends, and just fear took over and people went, I mean, there's now, but the good thing now is that stuff gets found out so quickly, right? You can research and find the backstory. Like when I was so when I was in high school, and sports supplements really starting to take off, and you had things like creatine coming out and ephedrine and all this stuff, and they would ban, oh, this substance got banned, it killed this kid, this wrestler was trying to cut weight and he took this and it killed him. It's like, the dude was wearing a suit made out of garbage bags, and he was in the sauna riding the exercise bike. That's what killed him. Okay. Yes, the fact that he had ephedra and took that beforehand didn't help. It jacked his heart rate up, and he couldn't cool himself down and he died. But what are we really going after here? And then it was the energy drink / alcohol drinks when all the Four Locos came out and all that stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, you get my daughter, she died because she drank too many of those. It's like, well, no, your daughter had a lot of issues that you weren't dealing with. So she was bulimic. So she was well below weight. Oh, and there was also a ton of cocaine in her system. Might have had something to do with it. But here's something I can point at and say, this is the cause of the tragedy in my life. I can go after it. And what is that? It spreads. And then what? Parents are like, oh my God, they're telling their kids, you stay away from that stuff. We got to get together. We can't have this stuff. So, I mean, that's everything happens that way. So now with social media, there's 5 of those a day. There's 5 of those stories every single day. And it gets sensationalized. And it's not till later on that someone goes, hey, wait a minute. This is all based on junk. And then that suddenly that court case goes away, and they drop all the charges and there's nothing there. So that cycle of things getting corrected, it is also happening faster. So it's like there's good and bad. These things are now in our face more. There's a lot more. But because of that communication, it can also be solved relatively quickly. So there's 2 sides to the coin.
Well, I would ask you this. I would ask Adam, have you ever heard of Encyclopedia or Funkin' Wagnalls or any of those stuff? Because I'll tell you right now, one of the things that we have in our T3, Adam, on our Train the Trainer program is that when you're doing the research on these, you have to cite your source, you have to show the source, you have to, conditionally test the veracity of the information. And Wikipedia is write your own story. No offense, Paul, but you know that sometimes when you see a story on Wikipedia, it's just so outlandish, but there's nobody editing. So how do you, Adam, you were born fully grown. You literally were born into this with internet, with all that communication. How is it when you have to like deal with people my age? How do you do it? How do you do it well, I should say?
I basically, like you said, like years ago, it was, like encyclopedia and, early days of internet. I remember I remember using my grandma's partner's computer and the dial-up, the making the noise. So yeah, I used Google a lot as a kid. Obviously books at school, and then Wikipedia came up. But you said that's just kind of anyone can kind of put information on there. But what I use now is alternative search browsers called DuckDuckGo, and it basically filters out all the crap and kind of gives you what you're actually searching for. And I kind of make up my own mind really with it. I think especially in the past couple of years of COVID, there's a lot of misinformation, and there's lots of misinformation anyway. And what Brian was saying earlier, like what people need to do is take a step back, can have that little voice in their head, listen to themselves and question, what is this in front of me? And it's ultimately a bit like self-awareness in some way, kind of self-discipline, and questioning, do I really need to do this? Is this going to benefit me? And kind of taking that, like what you guys talk about, taking that step out of the box and looking at the situation in a different way and kind of asking yourself, is this going to benefit me? And I think if people did that a lot more in their lives and asked themselves certain questions, they probably wouldn't get involved in certain things. It's like, you and Brian and Greg talk about training, changing behavior, and people in certain, how can I put it? High intense situations, or if they're in bad habits, asking themselves certain questions, really, do you think like taking a step back might change certain grooves in people's lives? I mean, Paul might find that in coaching people like as well.
Yeah. And we refer to that as tactical patience and tactical cunning in some aspect, which means that you have to take another person's perspective. But that literally means walking around in their shoes and tasting their food and seeing the world through their eyes and wondering what it's like not to have all the things that you have, or because if you don't, then what happens is your confirmation bias is so strong, you think us and them. The minute that you make a comment, us and them, that diminishes both of your points of view. That's all I would add as a cautionary tale.
And the other thing I would say is, like you were talking about, like DuckDuckGo, and I know a little bit about DuckDuckGo, but how do you know that's even reputable, right? How do you even know they have a lien? So that's another thing that we have to be careful of in society. I mean, where are they coming from with this article? Where are they coming from? Because I don't know if there's very many articles that are just straight down the middle. There seems to be some kind of lien, and sometimes you got to understand the lien and then read the article, see where they're coming from first, and then you can make up your own opinion on that. And that's a tough thing. That's hard to do sometimes. You just don't know.
Paul, that's spot on. And biases are so strong. One of the great things about it, Paul, is that science gives us a way out. Science says, listen, you can believe what the best information is that you've gathered, as long as you're out there gathering, right? As long as you're not reading one source and saying so there, or joining a party and saying so there and just reading off their manifesto. But the great thing about science is if somebody comes on the show or somebody contacts Brian and I and says, you know what you haven't considered? You haven't considered Gödel's incompleteness, or you haven't considered Heisenberg. If you hadn't, some science that's vetted and tested and been out there that everybody slapped the table on, if they make a change, then I'm willing to change as well. That's the point. And I don't think you can get there from just scanning headlines. And I think we're in a habit of scanning headlines and then getting baited, hooked in, to that flashy headline. At least my generation is. Let me clarify.
No, and I think that this is one point where I will say there is a big generational difference in how we look at this stuff one person, like, so let's say I'm going to compare Greg and Adam, because you're for this discussion on the opposite ends of the age spectrum, right? And a few other spectrums, but anyway, so but
if you only know. Yeah.
but
Thanks,
but
Brian.
the idea is, because let's say Adam has been around it more his whole life, it has less meaning when even just like stupid comments or shitty remarks on social media, he knows, like, well, people just kind of just spout off, you know what I mean? It's like they don't necessarily mean that. It's different because it's a written word now, whereas if you heard that someone just saying that, you probably wouldn't think too much of it. But I mean, even that the difference, Greg, of when you're listening in on a phone call, but then when that transcript is read in court, well, that sounds a lot different than when you're in the moment of that phone call, right? So but at the other end is, since you're so used to, your generation, Greg, I would say, would be so more used to when you write something down and I print it up, it has meaning because I've gone through it. I've taken the time to write it down and I've read it. Then maybe I had to get it submitted to a publisher, an editor, something, and there's a process there. So that holds a lot more weight to you. So you're applying it from that. Like, how could you say well, to Adam, like, well, that's not like their definitive statement. That was just the off the cuff initial remark. And so, which is
good. I don't
get
that even now.
Right.
But I have trouble with context, because somebody will send me a text message and I'll go high and right. And immediately I reach out to Brian and I'll go, what the F? And this guy, and Brian goes, whoa, back it up. That was ironic. Look at how and I don't know that, so I don't think I'm the only one out there.
But that's why we have emojis and GIFs and all those things to provide context to what you're saying. I mean, that's the whole reason behind all those.
Unless me.
But I think a younger generation is starting to realize that. And like I said, we're not as far along on this whole social media internet age as we think we are. Like, we're still figuring this all out. And so there's going to be an ebb and flow. There's going to be that pendulum swing of logic. And then it's going to settle somewhere and not swing as much, because we're going to have a little bit more collective understanding, I think. I mean, that appears to be where it's heading anyway.
Let me ask you this, Brian. So you know that we travel a lot, and Paul, you and Adam know that Brian and I are always eternally in airports, right? So you have noticed a difference. Like, there's 2.5 of me to the one Brian, and our head sizes are relatively close, but I'm a big guy. So when I travel, one of the things I look forward to is, before I meet Brian, because it's only going to be kale and quinoa, I've got to, carb up in the gosh damn hotel or in the airport. So I was at the airport in Denver, and I go, oh, there's a place to eat. So I go over to sit down to have breakfast, because my generation was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know what I'm saying? Between meals, snacks, eat, crap, and have 12 cups of coffee. So I go over and I'm waiting, and the lady never comes by. So there's this little decal that's on the table that I'm supposed to scan for the menu and then submit my menu, and she'll bring it by. When I went up and asked the young lady, I said, hey, can I get water and a cup of coffee? She almost shit herself. And then I said, do you have like a paper menu? And she's like, no, that's the menu, that little square. And so I tried to get it on my phone, and I don't have all these fancy apps on my phone. And so I was like, hey, can I just get a couple of eggs and some hash brown? And she was like, well, let me see. We were not communicating at all. And I was creating a tremendous amount of anxiety in her morning. And that wasn't my intent. And so here I'm getting heat flashes and going, I'm going to lose it. What am I going to do? The idea is that I think if everybody stepped back, just gave themselves the gift of time and distance, and said, wait a minute, this person might be from a different background. Let's try to get ourselves in their head and see where they're at this moment. But there was all take and no give, Brian. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And Adam, that's your generation I'm talking about. I hate to point fingers, but literally, she dismissed me the minute I didn't know how to use my smartphone.
I actually have a question that I want to raise to Brian Gray, because you guys deal with human behavior. There is a stigma with the millennial generation, and I think it's called the Gen Z. I think it's after that. There's a stigma of them being a little bit more sensitive than other generations. But I want to ask you guys that question. Is that in context?
Every single generation has said the same thing about the next generation. Nowhere throughout history can you go back and they go, these kids today, they're gonna solve everything. We got it. We did it right with this group. Yep. Like, they are the best we have ever had. They never have that. And it's so, when people come, those comments, I never take away anything from those conversations. There's no value I've ever taken away where I go, what do we do? There's ones when you say, like we just discussed, I thought was great, the differences in Adam and Greg interacting with social media. That's sense making, that's understanding. But these damn kids these days. I mean, they said that I'm part of a millennial generation. You know what I know? Fucking war. I have a lot of dead friends.
Exactly.
That's my fucking generation. That's all I know. But you're gonna say like, oh, we're weak or something, dude. I've spent more time in combat. I've watched more friends die in combat and then die when they came back home because your punk asses didn't set us up for success. So I hate that. Like, let's fight against generations. Like, okay, like that's junk. Like it gets nowhere. Recognizing differences to increase communication or sense making and problem solving, I'm all for. That's good stuff. Because Paul, you see the world different. Adam, you see the world different. I see the world different. Greg does. And there's certain themes throughout generational, like we just brought it up. So those are great because we can go, oh, I get it. Greg does that all the time. I explain to him on social media. He goes, oh, fuck. Okay.
Exactly.
I get it. Sorry, I'm swearing out.
But I was all bent out of shape before that. Right.
But you get it. And so he goes, now I understand. Because Greg makes the joke, like, I don't understand social media. And like, he doesn't understand how to use it, but he understands it better than anyone. Like, because he goes, oh, okay. As soon as I say one thing, he goes, oh, got it. That's why and it's like, he gets it better than the person who posted it. So
I'll tell you this though, Paul, Brian's an idiot savant, heavy on the idiot some days, but he's savanting it right now. And the one thing is Brian always says, good idea, stick around, which is really deep and meaningful. But Brian picked up a couple of quotes from Pompeii and what is it next to Pompeii? Heliopolis? No, something like that. The little, it starts with an H, a little city that was right down the road. And Brian brings it up and you talk about that long ago. They were talking on social media by posting on the wall. And I dug up one from 5000 BC from Sumer. And Sumer says, kids, what's the matter with kids these days? They don't listen. So Brian's right, in every generation has that. But I think what's more necessary to the exact point, I think, of what your comment was, I think that because I embrace Adam, and I'm telling all my friends, you got to listen to Adam. And people go on, and Adam, I'm talking with you in the room. People go on and they go, Adam Parr, am I listening to the right podcast? And I go, yeah. Set down all your intellectual preconceived notions and sit down and listen to his show. And Paul, I'm doing the same for you too. And for a completely different reason, because of where you're coming at with the information. And that's why I got to call Brian sometime. And I go, hey, am I reading this right? And Brian goes, no, that's bullshit. Don't worry about that. But take a look at this. And so what do we do in the morning for the first hour? Sean Clements, Shelley, Brian, and I share information, but it'll only be a line or two from pertinent articles to see what the pulse is of. That's why you don't do pop culture, because pop culture is so fleeting and shitty. You know what I'm saying? And so a conversation like this, where we've got 4 generations represented, to me is much more important, the outcomes, than just a person on transmit with their idea how to fix your life, you know? And that's why I appreciated this. I really wanted to talk to you, Paul, because all Brian knew about you and all I knew about you is what we could read. And now we see you. Now we get to hear you. And the same with Adam. Every time we're on a podcast, I'm like, why are we on this podcast? And I have so much fun. As soon as we get off, I call Brian and I go, we got a book with Adam again. So I hope you feel that same way, that it's not just that we're having fun, but we're actually getting somewhere.
Oh yeah. I was excited about this conversation because I like we talked about, I've had both of you guys on my podcast. Yep. And I see you guys on Adam Parr stuff all the time because like you guys, I'm a big fan of Adam Parr and what he does. Yep. And I love the back and forth that you have, especially Greg, with when the girlfriend was right behind Adam and
exactly.
You're talking, and I'm like, thank goodness he had his headphones on at that moment in time.
Exactly. And Paul, look behind him, just on Adam's left there, that hat. If I could be that hat just for an hour and tell you all those stories, can you imagine that poor girl's mother and father need to talk to me, Adam. Me and your mom, we'll set her down and tell her what your hormones are going through. We'll do you a big service.
Please stop. Please.
Oh my God. I was going to say something, I forgot now.
Yeah, I bet.
Hey, I bet you did, because I know what you're thinking.
I know what you're thinking right now.
Shout out everybody to Kevin Nahai. I know he couldn't be here because he's in his rolls eating caviar, that bastard. But what a nihilist. We love him to death. Make sure you tell him that we said hi, will you? Because he never answers my emails.
Yeah, definitely will do. And Yeah, I just want to say, like, it's always, I'm really blessed and grateful to, be all of your friends and to be able to do podcasts like this, and I just think it's really important, like what you said, Greg, that, is really important, the things that we talk about, and that we take something away from this, we put something out there into the world. And I think it's quite awesome to do these podcasts, and that we can have this relationship with each other and to talk about and to be open about what we want to talk about as well.
That's great. That's great. And you know what? Discourse, we don't have to always agree on everything. The idea that we bring different perspectives and we can disagree with each other openly. People would be under the assumption that Brian and I are on the same page all the time. Nothing is further from the truth. Yeah. And I think that's the longevity of our relationship, is that Brian and I are like bickering old women some days. You get what I'm trying to say? Now that's not right at all.
What is it? Waldorf and Astoria? Is that what their names?
Yeah,
the Muppets up in the balcony Muppets. Who are just yelling down. Yeah,
that's us. That's us. But Paul, you're now a member of that balcony, and there's always going to be a chair for you. I mean, there always has been, but your content keeps getting better and better. And Adam, I would challenge you. Listen, the analogy you made about the Coke or the Pepsi today, that's enough for me to tune into the next one. That's the kind of stuff people need to hear, and you're the best at laying that out. And I'll tell you, with that sort of, I don't know anything about the language, whether it's Cockney or whatever, but you've got an accent. You guys invented English, right? And you've got the accent, and it's always better with the sham wow hearing you say it than me.
No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's a unique set of words. I think, like, there's certain ways that we say things over here. Like you say, you gotta say mail, I'll say post. I'm gonna post that to you. And sometimes,
right.
I remember when I went to America, actually, I kept saying cheers to people. And I was just getting blank expressions, because obviously cheers is obviously what you do with glasses.
Yeah.
Or calling him mate, you don't want to say mate to me. Or premarital intercourse in your condition right now. That has a totally different meaning in America. You'd be getting at the altar with a shotgun right now, mister. Just so you know that.
And another thing that people say in Europe, that it's just like whatever, and it's horrible here in the States, is the C word. You say the C word in the States, and that's fighting words. You say that in Europe, it's like
that is amazing.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. We have a dear friend, Marren, and he's got a very enlightening way of making a conversation. And that C word, bollocks is a punctuation mark at the end of the sentence with 3 C words in there. And you're like, oh, that wouldn't go here at all.
Yeah, we can't say that.
Nope, that would not go here at all. Well, even behavior bitches. Hey, shout out to behavior bitches. We absolutely love that podcast and love talking to Leah and
Casey.
Leah and Casey. Oh my God. They were a lot of fun. But that took a little bit, because we have listeners to our show that once we said behavior bitches, they would take the right-hand turn off that exit and say, wow, that's the meaning to all women and this and that and the other. Take a step back. That's their name.
That's what I was saying. Even when I was sharing their post, like, I was like, wanted to say, like, these bitches are hilarious. And I'm like, wait, can I say that? Because, like,
I don't think you can. Yeah.
They call themselves that. So that's okay. Right. Like, it's a joke. Like, I don't think they're.
We have to get Shelly to say it. I think.
Like, it's so funny. I literally sat there and was like, it's right there in the damn title, and I'm still not sure if I can use it.
So true. So true.
But it's interesting, isn't it, with those cultures in different parts of the world and different views on things, isn't it? All kind of like ties into that as well. And
but as long as you don't misuse it, Adam. For example, it's like I've made mistakes in foreign countries where, you're not supposed to touch with your left or right hand, and you're not supposed to show your foot or shoe or anything else. So what I say when I first start off in those cultures through my interpreter, translator, cultural attaché, I go, I'm a big dumb animal, and I'm going to learn by my scar tissue. Please teach me. Show me what I'm supposed to do. And you learn so much more, because again, what do? You relegate to the listening, and you say, you teach me, you transmit. So that's all it would take.
And if you're being honest, people pick up on that, and they know you made an honest mistake, or you clearly didn't understand that, and they'll help you. Like, that's the thing, is if you're being genuine, people really relate to that and go, oh, hey, hey, we don't really say that here. You're like, oh, my bad. Like, I didn't know. They're like, oh, we could tell you didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like, they'll know.
How often do you get that, Brian? I'm just wondering.
They're forgiving. Like, we go somewhere and they're like, hey, that joke doesn't work here. Let me tell you why. And I'm like, oh, well, it's perfect. We were working with an airline company, and we break up into cells to do groups, and we have like green cell and black cell and red cell. And they were like, oh, hey, we happen to give it, we didn't know that. Well, to pilots, a red cell is like the worst possible weather thing you could ever face. And it's something you never want to see in your career. So when we kept saying red cell, it was like this thing to them that was really negative. Exactly. So we're like, okay, you guys are gonna be orange then. You know what I mean? It was like little things like that. Like, how would we ever know that? It deviates from everything we typically do. So, but culture, they're like, oh, don't worry, like, you're good. Like, we get it. We just wanted to let you know. And in this context, that's what that means. Holy cow. Well, I just learned something new that day. Can't wait for tomorrow. You know what I mean? So
that's a totem pole. It's a modern day totem pole. It's the cave painting. It's us dancing around that fire. And I think that's more important than anything else. How do we teach kids? And the whole, we do Arcadia Cognerati. It's Greek. Well, there's pedagogy and there's andragogy. What's the difference? Well, pedagogy is when I'm teaching a kid. Andragogy is when I'm teaching a bunch of subject matter experts. Is it different? Yeah, it's different. Do we ever really take the time to do that? No, we're transmitting out there like everybody else is a bunch of idiots. You know what I'm saying? And saying, read this, you dummy. And I think people resent that. But that's a great way of thinking of it. This type of podcast to me moves the dial more than one where it's like 3. Write down this, 4. Write down. Those things don't really help move the dial for me. You know what I mean? Because I know I'm a flawed human. Nobody has to tell me I'm fat and I'm lazy and I got to get to the gym more. I already know that. What you got to do is you got to try to unpack me and help me understand it, And I think you guys do a great job at that. I really do.
I appreciate that. And since Brian's on the left of you, I feel like I'm on the right of you.
There you go. That's it. So feel free to do an episode called Right of Greg, because you've done great episode. I love your content. And Adam, the best part about your content is when you have Paul and I on. Brian's been a little weak today, you noticed, but maybe we could fill that square with somebody else. I don't know.
No, it's always a pleasure connecting with you guys, and I really think it's great that we all got together for this episode as well. And I think, like what you said, we've all got our own inputs and own experiences from different parts of the world, and I think it's really good that we can kind of do this and share and talk about certain topics, and we all kind of learn something from it. And like you said, it's different, isn't it? Rather than having like a bullet point book of the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you know what I would add? Brian and I love to do this, and Paul, I know you do this as well, because you're constantly sampling your audience. We don't sample per se, but we always say, look, if you've got a question that you want to see this team handle, reach out to Adam, because Paul and Brian and I would love to jump back on. And Adam, poke your viewers a little bit, poke the bear and say, hey, listen, what is it you want to hear us talk about? Because nothing, we say that all the time. There's nothing, no topic. And guess what? If it's out of our ken and we don't know it, we'll be the first to go time out. We don't know anything about that. But if it's in human behavior or human performance or increasing your resilience, God, we'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's important, isn't it? Being open, and like what you guys do is like being accountable. You will put your hands up and say, we don't know, or it's not our field. And I think like
I say that a lot.
Yeah, and we have to like be open to have those people so they can open up to us, to throw questions at us, to talk about. And I think that's what we should do, isn't it? Be open and say, what's your take on this, and then discuss it and decipher it. I think
exactly.
Really important.
All jokes aside, that's exactly what it is. And being able to decipher it, sometimes you need a interpreter or a translator. And that's when I reach out to you. That's when I reach out to Paul. That's when I reach out to Brian and people like you, because I don't know. I'm on the right track maybe, but I don't know what the answer is. And you guys won't give me the answer, but you'll certainly throw enough breadcrumbs out there that I'm likely to find the answer. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
The only reason I'm trying to say that is you've got to get that microphone back to McDonald's. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Can I take your order thing? And I'm sure that you got to put all the camera equipment back before your girlfriend comes home. I'm just saying. We can see what's going on there.
No, definitely. And is there anything that you guys want to say before we kind of like wrap up? Is there anything you want to add?
Oh, I appreciate you having us on, man. I really do appreciate and loving the conversations and keep up what you're doing. And I love talking, getting new perspective. Having Paul on here was great. You know what I mean? Like it's all, you know, we all sometimes can be talking about the same things in different ways. And I like having those discussions because a listener may, you know what, Adam, maybe they didn't connect with anything you said so far, but then Paul said something today, they went, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? And that's what it's about. Someone listens and goes, okay, I see what you're seeing there. I can take that ball and run with it. You know what I mean? And maybe that one little thing, that snippet they heard went, oh, just change their perspective on things.
Right.
That's it. If you can change your perspective, even just a little bit, you'd be amazed at what you could accomplish.
And I would caveat that I'm just here because I'm lonely.
Yes.
And I would pass the Paul.
Greg, you're going to have to force Greg off this call.
Yeah. I stay on even after all you guys leave. I just stare at the screen, you know. Hello, open. Go ahead, Paul.
One of the biggest takeaways I got was great advice that you gave, Greg, that you gave Adam is use your own quotes, Adam. Yeah, you're a smart man. You don't need to use Gary V or whatever they do, because people are going to go on there and go, well, then I'll just go to Gary V. Well, no, I want to go to Adam Parr. I want to hear what Adam Parr has to say. I want to get his viewership. So start using your own quotes. Who cares about everybody else? You got a lot of smart things to say.
Yep. And you'll need to practice when her dad shows up knocking on the door and you have to, sorry, sir, you know, good a time as any, Adam.
Yeah, no, it's true. I really, really appreciate, you know, everything you guys say, and I will start to make my own quotes more and not listen to the other noise. It's good practice.
That's Brian. It's signal to noise ratio, buddy. 101. Yep. And we could do a whole podcast on that next time we're with you, Adam. Yeah, awesome. No, it sounds good. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. I'm really grateful we can do this. And I wish you all the best in everything that you're doing. And I look forward to next time. And what I'll do is I'll put all your connections and where people can find you in the links.
Appreciate that
as well.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it.
Welcome. Honestly, and Paul, huge fan. Keep up the great content. Adam, same thing. Huge fan. Keep up the great content.
Thanks, guys.
Will do. Take care, everyone.
See ya.